The Dominion had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. They had conquered hundreds of worlds and forced thousands of species to bow before their power. Their empire stretched across the Orion sector like a dark shadow that swallowed everything it touched. No one had ever successfully them. No one had ever even tried. High Chancellor stood in the center of the great assembly hall on Prime. The chamber was enormous and built from living crystal that glowed with soft blue light. Representatives from over 300 species filled the curved seats that rose up toward the domed ceiling. All of them had submitted to rule long ago. All of them knew their place. Was tall even by standards. His scales shimmered with colors that shifted between purple and gold as he moved. His eyes were black and cold like the void between stars. He had led the Dominion for 600 years and had never known failure. "We have a small matter to discuss today," announced. His voice echoed through the chamber, and the translation devices carried his words to every ear. "The species known as humans have rejected our generous offer of integration." A ripple of surprise moved through the assembly. Rejection was rare. Rejection was foolish. Rejection always ended the same way. The ambassador raised one of its 6 thin limbs to speak. It was an insect-like creature with compound eyes that reflected the crystal light. "How is this possible? Do they not understand what happens to those who refuse the Dominion?" Made a gesture that might have been amusement. "They are young. They have only traveled among the stars for 300 years. Perhaps they do not yet understand how the galaxy works." "What do we know about their military capabilities?" asked the delegate. There were large reptilian beings who had once commanded the second most powerful fleet in the sector. That was before the Dominion crushed them. Now they served as loyal soldiers in the war machine. Consulted the data tablet in his hand. "Our scouts have observed their fleet for decades. They possess approximately 200 vessels. Their ships use primitive fusion engines for propulsion. They have no shield technology that we can detect. Their weapons appear to be basic missile systems and low-powered energy cannons." Laughter filled the chamber. It came from dozens of species in dozens of different forms, but they all meant the same thing. The humans were a joke. The humans were nothing. "Send a battle group," the delegate suggested. 12 capital ships should be more than enough to convince them of their mistake. If they surrender quickly, we can be merciful. If they resist, we will make an example of them. Nodded slowly. "I agree. Fleet Commander will lead the expedition. He has handled many such operations before. I expect the matter will be resolved within one cycle." The assembly moved on to other business. The humans were barely worth a few minutes of discussion. They were just another primitive species who would soon learn to kneel. Far away across the vast emptiness of space, the planet Earth turned slowly in the light of its yellow sun. It looked peaceful from orbit. Blue oceans and green continents covered by swirls of white cloud. It looked like a world that had never known war. But deep beneath the surface, in a facility that appeared on no map and existed in no official record, Admiral Jack Collins studied a holographic display that showed him everything that did not want him to see. He was 62 years old with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too much. He had commanded ships in 3 different conflicts and had buried more friends than he cared to count. "They took the bait," said Commander Lisa Monroe. She stood beside him watching the same display. She was younger than Collins by 20 years, but she had earned her place through skill and dedication. Her voice was calm even though she knew what was coming. 12 capital ships and 400 support vessels. Standard attack formation. Collins nodded but did not speak right away. He was thinking about everything that had led to this moment. 300 years of preparation. 300 years of secrets. 300 years of waiting for the enemy to make the first move. "Contact the President," Collins finally said. "Tell him the time has come." Monroe picked up a secure communication device and spoke quietly into it. Within minutes, the response came back. Authorization granted. Protocol revelation was now active. Collins allowed himself a small smile. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had carried a heavy burden for a very long time and was finally about to set it down. In the lowest level of Site 7, there was a room that only 12 people on Earth knew existed. Inside that room, Dr. Price sat before a console that controlled the most elaborate deception in human history. He was small and thin, with thick glasses and hands that shook slightly when he was nervous. His hands were shaking now. "It is really happening," he whispered to himself. "After all this time, it is really happening." He entered a long sequence of codes. Across the solar system, hidden systems began to wake up. On the dark side of the moon, massive doors started to open. In the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, engines that had been cold for decades began to warm. Around the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, shapes that had been mistaken for rocks started to move. Price had dedicated his entire life to this moment. He had designed the fake ships that they had detected. He had created the false signals that their scouts had intercepted. He had built a mask for humanity to wear, and now it was time to take that mask off. The thought they were coming to conquer a primitive species with 200 ships. They had no idea that those 200 ships were toys. They had no idea what was hiding in the darkness. They had no idea what humanity had become. Admiral Collins watched the preparations unfold on his display. Thousands of status lights changed from red to yellow to green as ships and weapons and defense systems came online one after another. "How long until the fleet arrives?" he asked. 17 days, Monroe replied. Collins straightened his uniform and took a deep breath. "Then we have 17 days to get ready. I want every ship at full combat status. I want every weapon system tested and confirmed. I want every crew member to understand exactly what we are fighting for." He turned to face the officers gathered behind him. They were the best humanity had to offer. They had trained for this their entire careers, knowing that someday the test would come. "They think we are weak," Collins told them. "They think we are afraid. They think they can walk into our home and take whatever they want. In 17 days, we are going to show them how wrong they are. In 17 days, the whole galaxy is going to learn what happens when you threaten Earth." No one cheered. No one needed to. They all knew what was at stake. They all knew what they had to do. The countdown had begun. The story of humanity's great deception began 300 years ago when the first scout ship entered the Sol system. The year was 2087, and humans had only recently learned to travel between planets. They had colonies on Mars and research stations on the moons of Jupiter. They thought they were alone in the universe. They were wrong. The scouts watched Earth for 6 months before making contact. They studied human technology and found it primitive. They observed human society and found it divided. They calculated human military strength and found it laughable. Their report to the Dominion was simple. This species posed no threat. They could be conquered whenever it was convenient. But the scouts made a mistake. They assumed that what they could see was all there was to see. They did not know about the radio signals that human scientists had detected decades earlier. They did not know that humanity had already learned the Dominion existed. They did not know that humanity had been preparing. Secretary of Defense Amy Grant sat in a secure briefing room beneath the White House. She had been appointed to her position only 3 months ago, and there were still secrets she was learning. The biggest secret of all was about to be revealed to her. Dr. Price stood at the front of the room with a presentation that would change everything she thought she knew. He looked nervous, but his voice was steady when he spoke. "Madam Secretary," he began, "what I am about to tell you is classified at the highest level. Only the President and 11 other people have full knowledge of what I am going to show you. After this briefing, you will be the 13th. Grant nodded for him to continue. She had expected something unusual when she received the summons. She had not expected what came next. "In 2031, Price explained, Our deep space monitoring network detected structured signals coming from outside the solar system. It took us 15 years to decode them, but when we did, we learned the truth. We were not alone, and the beings out there were not friendly. He pressed a button, and the display behind him lit up with images of warships. The signals we intercepted were military communications from an empire called the Dominion. We learned that they controlled hundreds of star systems. We learned that they had conquered thousands of species, and we learned that eventually they would come for us. Grant felt cold. How long have we known about this? Nearly 300 years, Price admitted. Every president since then has been briefed. Every administration has contributed to the preparations. We knew we could not match them in an open confrontation. Not yet, so we decided to hide. He changed the display to show a map of the solar system. Dozens of red dots appeared in locations Grant had never heard of. These are the shipyards we built in secret, under the surface of moons, inside hollowed-out asteroids, in places so dark and cold that no scanner could find them. Grant stared at the map. How many ships? As of this morning, we have 9,412 combat-ready vessels. Price let that number sink in. Our ships use technology that they cannot detect, quantum fold drives that allow faster-than-light travel, adaptive shields that can absorb energy weapons, kinetic accelerators that fire projectiles at nearly the speed of light. And the fleet they have been observing. Decoys, every single one. We built them to look exactly like what a primitive species would build. Slow engines, weak weapons, no shields. They saw what we wanted them to see. Grant leaned back in her chair. Her mind was racing through the implications. You have been lying to an alien empire for 300 years. Price nodded. We had to. If they knew what we really had, they would have sent their full force against us. We needed time to build. We needed time to prepare. And now that time is over. Far from Earth in the cold darkness beyond Neptune, the first Shadow Fleet held position in perfect silence. These ships were painted black, and their hulls were designed to absorb every type of radiation they used for scanning. To any sensor, they were invisible. They were ghosts waiting to become real. Captain Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge of the USS Vigilant. It was the largest ship in the fleet, and it was his to command. He had spent 20 years working toward this moment, and now it was finally here. "Status report," he said calmly. Lieutenant Commander Kate checked her displays before responding. "All ships report ready. Weapons systems charged. Drives standing by. The fleet is yours, Admiral Collins." Hayes shook his head slightly. "Not Admiral, not yet. Let us win this battle first." He walked to the forward viewing port and looked out at the darkness. Somewhere out there, the fleet was coming. They thought they were going to crush a helpless enemy. They had no idea they were walking into a trap. "Do you think they will surrender when they see our true strength?" asked. Hayes considered the question carefully before answering. "They have ruled through fear for 12,000 years. They do not know how to surrender. They do not even understand the concept of losing. That is what makes them dangerous, and that is what will destroy them." Back on Earth, Dr. Price finished his briefing and waited for Secretary Grant to respond. She sat in silence for a long time, processing everything she had learned. Finally, she spoke. "What happens now?" "Now we wait. The fleet will arrive in 17 days. When they enter weapons range, we will drop our disguise and show them what humanity is truly capable of. If they are smart, they will retreat. If they are not, we will be forced to demonstrate our power in a way they cannot ignore. And after that..." Price took off his glasses and rubbed his tired eyes. "After that, everything changes. The galaxy will know about us. The other species that the Dominion has conquered will learn that resistance is possible. We will either become a beacon of hope or a target for destruction. Probably both." Grant stood and walked to the display showing the hidden fleet. 9,000 ships waiting in the darkness. 300 years of planning coming down to a single moment. Our ancestors made a choice, she said quietly. They chose to prepare instead of panic. They chose to hide instead of fight. They chose to give us a chance. Yes, Price agreed. And now we have to decide what to do with that chance. Grant turned to face him. Her expression was determined and her voice was strong. We honor their sacrifice, we protect our world, and we show that humanity will not kneel. The countdown continued. 17 days until contact. 17 days until the truth could no longer be hidden. 17 days until everything changed forever. The fleet entered the Sol system on a bright Tuesday morning Earth time. Fleet Commander stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the distant yellow star grow larger on his display. He had done this many times before. He had crushed rebellions on a dozen worlds. He had burned cities and broken armies. This mission would be no different. "Report," he commanded. His voice was hard and cold like metal scraping against stone. His sensor officer responded immediately. 212 human vessels detected moving to intercept. Configuration matches our intelligence files. Primitive fusion drives and basic weapon systems. No shields. Made a sound that passed for satisfaction among his kind. They actually think they can fight us. How amusing. The fleet was magnificent by any standard. 12 capital ships formed the core of the formation. Each one was 3 kilometers long and bristled with weapons that could crack a planet. 400 support vessels surrounded them in a perfect geometric pattern. Together, they represented enough firepower to conquer an entire star system. "Open a channel to their fleet commander," ordered. "Let us give them one chance to surrender before we destroy them." The communication link connected and the image of Admiral Jack Collins appeared on the main display. He was standing on a bridge that looked clean but simple, nothing impressive, nothing threatening, but there was something in his eyes that made pause. It was not fear, it was something else entirely. "Fleet Commander," Collins said. His voice was calm and steady. "You have entered sovereign human space with hostile intent. This is your only warning. Withdraw now or face the consequences." Laughed. The sound was harsh and sharp like breaking glass. "You threaten me with 200 primitive ships. Your courage is admirable, but your stupidity is remarkable. Surrender immediately and I will be merciful. Resist and I will reduce your planet to ash." Collins did not react to the threat. He did not flinch or look away. Instead, he smiled. It was a small smile, but it was genuine. It was the smile of someone who knew something their enemy did not. "We were hoping you would say that," Collins replied. He glanced at someone off-screen and nodded once. "Activate protocol revelation." For a moment, nothing happened. Then sensor officer made a sound that no had made in thousands of years. It was a sound of pure terror. "Commander," he stammered, "new contacts appearing. Hundreds of them, thousands, they are everywhere." Spun to look at the tactical display, and what he saw made his blood turn cold. Ships were appearing all across the system. They emerged from behind moons and asteroids. They rose from places that his sensors had scanned and found empty. They simply materialized out of nothing as their cloaking fields dropped. The 200 primitive human ships were still there, but now they were joined by an armada that dwarfed anything had ever seen. The tactical display kept updating as more and more contacts appeared. 1,000, 3,000, 5,000. The numbers kept climbing until they reached a figure that could not accept. 9,000 ships, his sensor officer whispered. "Their energy signatures are like nothing in our database. Commander, their weapon systems are powering up. They have us surrounded." On the bridge of the vigilant captain, Hayes watched the fleet with grim satisfaction. The enemy formation had frozen in place. They did not know what to do. They had never faced anything like this before. "All ships report ready," Lieutenant Commander announced. "Weapons locked on target, awaiting orders." Hayes opened a channel to Admiral Collins. "Sir, the fleet is in position. The trap is set." Understood, Collins replied. Hold fire until they make their choice. Give them every chance to retreat. On the flagship was shouting orders that his crew could not follow. Their formation was broken. Their confidence was shattered. Everything they had believed about this mission was wrong. How is this possible? Demanded. Our intelligence said 200 ships, 200 primitive vessels. Where did these come from? No one had an answer. They had ruled through superior information for 12,000 years. They had always known more than their enemies. They had always been one step ahead. Now they realized they had been fooled, completely and utterly fooled. Admiral Collins appeared on the display again. Fleet Commander, you have seen our true strength. You are outnumbered and order your ships to stand down and no one needs to die today. Stared at the human admiral with hatred burning in his eyes. Surrender was impossible. The Dominion did not surrender. The Dominion had never surrendered. To retreat now would mean disgrace. It would mean admitting that everything they believed about their superiority was a lie. All ships attack, commanded. Destroy them all. The fleet surged forward. Energy weapons blazed and missiles launched in streams of fire. For a moment the darkness of space lit up with the fury of their assault. Then humanity responded. From the outer edges of the system, 600 platforms that looked like ordinary asteroids revealed their true purpose. They were called hammers, and they fired projectiles at nearly the speed of light. The first round hit a cruiser before anyone even knew it was coming. One moment the ship was there. The next moment it was an expanding cloud of plasma and debris. More rounds followed. Ships vanished faster than their crews could react. Their shields, which had stopped every weapon they had ever faced, simply ceased to exist under the impact of projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. Hayes watched the destruction with no joy in his heart. These were living beings dying out there. They had families and hopes and fears just like humans, but they had chosen this. They had come to conquer and enslave. They had to be stopped. All ships engage, Collins ordered over the fleet channel. Show them what humanity can do. The human fleet moved with a precision that they could not match. Ships that should have been unable to maneuver at such speeds turned and dodged with impossible grace. Weapons that the Dominion could not even identify struck vessels from angles that should have been safe. Fleet Commander watched his command being torn apart around him. In his entire career, he had never experienced defeat. Now he was experiencing total annihilation. We need to retreat, his first officer said desperately. Commander, please, we cannot win this fight. But it was already too late. The human fleet had surrounded them completely. There was nowhere to run. There was nowhere to hide. For the first time in 12,000 years, the Dominion had met an enemy they could not defeat. And that enemy was humanity. The Battle of Saul raged across millions of kilometers of space. Ships tried to fight back, but their weapons could not track targets moving so fast. Their shields could not stop projectiles moving at speeds they had never imagined. Their tactics, which had worked against every enemy for thousands of years, were useless against an opponent who fought in ways they could not understand. Commander Lisa Monroe coordinated the engagement from the USS Sentinel. Her displays showed the entire battlefield in real time. Every ship, every weapon, every explosion. She watched the formation collapse piece by piece. 7th Fleet is engaging their left flank, she reported to Admiral Collins. 12th Fleet has cut off their retreat vector. 4th Fleet is moving to disable their capital ships. They are trapped, sir. Completely trapped. Collins nodded, but his expression remained grim. What are our casualties? Minimal so far, 12 ships damaged, 2 destroyed, 300 crew members lost. Monroe paused. They have lost over 200 vessels already. It was a stunning victory by any measure. Humanity had prepared for this battle for 3 centuries, and that preparation was paying off in ways that exceeded their most optimistic predictions. But Collins took no pleasure in the destruction. Every ship that died was filled with living beings who would never go home. Focus on disabling rather than destroying whenever possible, Collins ordered. I want prisoners. I want survivors. When this is over, the galaxy needs to know that humanity can show mercy even in war. On the flagship, Fleet Commander was screaming orders that no one could follow. His ship was damaged and listing badly. Half his bridge crew was dead. The displays that still worked showed nothing but disaster. How, he kept asking, how did they do this? His sensor officer was one of the few still alive at her station. Her voice trembled when she spoke. Commander, their technology is beyond anything we have encountered. Their ships can move in ways that should be impossible. Their weapons strike before we can even detect them. They have been hiding this from us. All this time they have been hiding. A particle beam struck the flagship and the whole ship shuddered. Lights flickered and alarms wailed. The smell of burning circuits filled the air. Shields failing, someone reported. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12, engines offline. Grabbed the edge of his command chair to keep from falling. Around him, his remaining crew looked to him for guidance. He had none to give. He had spent his entire career believing in superiority. He had never once questioned whether that belief was true. Now reality was proving it false in the most brutal way possible. Captain Daniel Hayes brought the Vigilant through the chaos of battle with deadly grace. His ship's weapons found target after target. Cruisers, destroyers, frigates, they all fell before the human assault. Target the flagship, Hayes ordered. Disable her weapons and engines. I want to take their commander alive. Lieutenant Commander executed the attack run with perfect precision. The Vigilant swept past the crippled command ship and fired concentrated beams at specific points along her hull. Each shot was calculated to cause maximum damage to systems while minimizing casualties. Their weapons are down, reported. Engines destroyed, they are dead in space. Hayes opened a channel to Admiral Collins. Sir, the enemy flagship is disabled. I am preparing boarding teams. Proceed, Captain. Take their commander into custody. Treat him with respect. He is defeated, but he is still a warrior. The boarding operation took less than 20 minutes. Human Marines in powered armor cut through the hull and swept through the damaged corridors. They encountered little resistance. Most of the crew had abandoned their posts or were too injured to fight. They found Fleet Commander on his bridge, surrounded by the bodies of his dead officers. He stood alone in the center of the room with his weapon drawn. For a moment it seemed like he might fight to the end. Then he looked at the humans standing before him. They were smaller then. Their bodies were soft and fragile compared to his scaled hide. By every measure of superiority, they should have been easy prey. But here they stood victorious, while everything he had believed lay in ruins around him. Lowered his weapon and let it fall to the floor. I surrender, he said quietly. The words tasted like poison in his mouth. The Marine commander stepped forward and secured the officer with restraints. Fleet Commander, you are now a prisoner of the Earth Defense Force. You will be treated according to the laws of war. No harm will come to you. Said nothing, there was nothing left to say. The battle lasted 6 more hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. One by one, the remaining ships were either destroyed or captured. Those that tried to flee were run down by faster human vessels. Those that surrendered were taken aboard prison transports with surprising gentleness. When it was finally over, Admiral Collins surveyed the aftermath from his command center. Of the original battle group, only 47 ships remained operational. All of them had surrendered. The rest were debris floating in the darkness or burning hulks drifting toward the sun. Final casualty report, Monroe announced. Humanity lost 23 ships and 842 personnel. The lost 353 ships and an estimated 120,000 personnel. We have taken 16,000 prisoners. Collins closed his eyes for a moment. So many dead. So many lives ended in a single day. This was the cost of survival. This was the price of freedom. "Begin recovery operations," he said finally. "Search for survivors among the wreckage. I do not care if they are human or anyone still alive gets rescued." "Yes, sir." The human fleet spread out across the battlefield. Search and rescue teams combed through the debris looking for life signs. Medical ships prepared to receive the wounded. Chaplains stood ready to comfort the dying regardless of what species they belonged to. Dr. Price watched the reports come in from his bunker on Earth. 300 years of preparation had led to this moment. 300 years of secrets and sacrifices and silent determination. And now it was done. "We won," he whispered to himself. The words did not feel real. But the victory was only the beginning. The Dominion would learn what had happened here. The other species they had conquered would learn as well. Everything was about to change. The galaxy had just discovered that humanity was not prey. Humanity was a predator that had been waiting in the darkness. And now it had revealed itself. The news reached Prime 3 weeks after the battle. A single courier ship had escaped the massacre and fled through hyperspace carrying the worst news the Dominion had ever received. High Chancellor stood in his private chambers reading the report for the 5th time. His scales had faded to a sickly gray color, and his hands trembled as he held the data tablet. Around him, his most trusted advisors waited in terrified silence. 9,000 ships, said. His voice was hollow and empty. They hid 9,000 ships from us for 300 years. They deceived us completely. High Chancellor, one advisor ventured carefully, perhaps we should send a larger fleet. Our full military strength could surely overwhelm them. Turned to look at the advisor with eyes that held no hope. Our full military strength is 22,000 vessels. They have nearly half that number, and their technology is clearly superior to ours. They destroyed our battle group in hours with minimal losses to themselves. The room fell silent. No one wanted to speak the truth that hung in the air between them. For the first time in 12,000 years, the Dominion faced an enemy they could not defeat. On Earth, President Marshall addressed the United Nations General Assembly in the largest diplomatic gathering in human history. Representatives from over 40 different alien species watched through quantum-link displays. Most of them were members of the Dominion who had submitted to rule long ago. All of them were reconsidering their positions. 300 years ago, Marshall began, humanity learned that we were not alone in the universe. We learned that a vast empire called the Dominion would one day come to our world and demand our submission. We had two choices. We could surrender our freedom or we could prepare to defend it. He paused and looked around the chamber. Human delegates from every nation sat together with expressions of unity that would have seemed impossible just weeks ago. The threat from beyond had finally accomplished what centuries of conflict could not. It had made humanity truly one people. "We chose to prepare," Marshall continued. "We built in secret. We hid in plain sight. We let our enemies believe we were weak while we grew strong. And when they finally came for us, we were ready." He straightened his shoulders and his voice grew stronger. "Today I address not only my fellow humans but every species that has been forced to bow before the Dominion. You are not alone. Resistance is possible. Freedom is possible. Humanity stands as proof." The assembly erupted in reaction. Some delegates cheered while others sat in stunned silence. The representatives walked out in anger, but no one tried to stop them. Their power to intimidate had been broken. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy transformed. 17 species formally from the Dominion and requested alliance with Earth. They had watched the Battle of Saul through intercepted transmissions, and they had seen something they never expected to see. They had seen hope. Admiral Collins met with the leaders of these new allies aboard a massive space station that humanity had constructed in neutral territory. Commander Lisa Monroe had been promoted to Rear Admiral and given command of the station. She had named it Unity as a symbol of what they were trying to build. "You have changed everything," the ambassador told Collins. His compound eyes reflected the stars visible through the observation window. "For thousands of years, we believed the Dominion was invincible. We believed resistance was futile. You have shown us that we were wrong." Collins shook his head. "We did not do this to become conquerors ourselves. Humanity has no interest in ruling other species. We fought to protect our home. Now we want to help others do the same." "But what will happen when the Dominion attacks again? They will not accept this defeat. They will come with their full strength." "Let them come," Collins replied. "We will be ready, and this time we will not be alone." Back on Earth, Dr. Price finally retired from his position as director of the Deception Program. His work was done. The secret he had spent his entire life protecting was now known throughout the galaxy. He spent his last day in the bunker walking through the empty corridors that had been his home for so long. Secretary Grant found him there staring at a display that showed the current status of humanity's fleet. Ships were being built faster than ever before. New technologies were being developed. Alliances were being formed. Everything was changing. "Any regrets?" Grant asked him. Price thought about the question for a long time before answering. "I regret that it took a war to bring us together. I regret the lives that were lost on both sides. I regret that our children will grow up knowing that there are enemies among the stars." He turned to face her. "But I do not regret what we did. We gave our species a chance to survive. We gave other species a reason to hope. Whatever happens next, at least we fought for something worth fighting for." 6 months after the Battle of Saul, the Dominion sent a diplomatic mission to Earth. It was the first time in their history that they had negotiated as equals rather than dictators. High Chancellor did not attend personally, but his representatives came with full authority to discuss terms. The negotiations lasted for months. There were threats and arguments and moments when it seemed like war would resume, but in the end an agreement was reached. The Dominion recognized human sovereignty. They agreed to free the species that had requested independence. They accepted that the galaxy was no longer theirs alone to rule. Captain Daniel Hayes did not participate in the negotiations. He had a different mission. The Vigilant had been reassigned to the newly formed Exploration Division with orders to travel beyond the boundaries of known space. There were more species out there waiting to be discovered. Some might become friends. Some might become enemies. But humanity would face them all with open eyes. "Course plotted," Lieutenant Commander reported from her station. "Unknown space ahead. No maps, no guides, just darkness and possibility." Hayes smiled. It was a genuine smile filled with hope for the future. "Then let us see what is out there. Let us show the galaxy who we really are." The Vigilant accelerated into the void, and the stars stretched into lines of light around them. Behind them, Earth continued to turn in the light of its sun. The blue planet that had given birth to a species that refused to surrender. The home of beings who had looked into the darkness and decided to become something greater than they were. Humanity had revealed its power to the galaxy, but the true revelation was something deeper than ships and weapons. It was the revelation that courage and determination could overcome any odds. It was the revelation that even the smallest species could change the course of history. The story of humanity among the stars was just beginning. And the galaxy would never be the same.